The desert morning in Santa Fe, New Mexico territory, broke harsh and bright, the kind of light that seemed to scrape the dust right off the ground. By mid-morning the trading square was alive with sound, horses stomping, mules braying, metal clanging, voices calling prices that mixed English, Spanish, and broken Apache. The town smelled of sweat, coffee, and gunpowder. Ethan Cole, a broad-shouldered cowboy in a faded brown hat, rode slowly through the crowd. His horse, Dusty, snorted as a cart full of corn nearly clipped his flank. Ethan guided him around and tied him near the saloon porch. He wasn't there for entertainment, he had business. His small cattle spread north of town was short on hands, and he hoped to find a worker or two for the spring branding season. But as he made his way down the wooden boardwalk, something about the crowd near the center square drew his attention. A tall wooden platform had been built, and on it stood several figures in chains, 3 men and 2 women. An auction. Ethan's stomach knotted. He had seen slave markets before, though by 1880 such trade was officially outlawed in most states. Still, the borderlands were lawless, and the black market trade of captives, often native people, continued in the shadows of civilization. The dealer, Mr. Hollis, was a thick-bellied man in a dusty vest, his hat tilted back as he shouted prices. "Buy one, get one free," he bellowed, laughter from the crowd following like a cruel echo. 2 fine Apache sisters, strong and quiet. "You won't find a better bargain today." Ethan stopped dead. 2 young women stood side by side on the platform. Their hands were bound in front, their dark hair hanging in loose braids matted with dust. The elder, maybe 20, kept her chin lifted despite the humiliation. The younger, barely 17, looked at the ground, her face streaked with tears. They both wore torn buckskin dresses, their feet bare, skin marked by travel and hardship. The men around laughed and jeered, throwing crude remarks that made Ethan's jaw tighten. He hated scenes like this, the smug cruelty of men who believed owning another person proved their strength. He'd been raised differently. His father had died fighting raiders, but he'd taught his son that every soul deserved respect, no matter the color of their skin or the language they spoke. "Come on, folks," Hollis called, clapping his hands. "These 2 come as a set, buy one, get one free. They'll cook, clean, work the fields, and they don't talk back. Who'll start the bid at $50? Coins jingled. Voices called numbers. Ethan's stomach churned. He turned to walk away, but froze when he saw the elder sister glance up. For one heartbeat her dark eyes met his. They weren't begging. They were defiant, full of life, pride, and a desperate kind of strength that demanded to be seen. Something inside Ethan shifted. He had come to hire help, not buy people. But if he walked away now, what would become of them? He knew exactly. They'd be dragged to a border ranch, treated worse than animals, and likely never see freedom again. His fists clenched at his sides. The dealer raised his voice again. "Nobody. $40. 35. 2 for the price of 1. Look at them, fit, healthy." Ethan took a slow step forward. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. "20, someone yelled from behind. 20. "You insult me, sir," Hollis barked, slapping his ledger. "They're worth twice that." 25, shouted another voice. Ethan's mind raced. He wasn't bidding for ownership, he was buying their release. He didn't even have room at his ranch for extra mouths, but he couldn't walk away. 30, he said quietly. Heads turned. Hollis squinted. 30, you. There, the cowboy with the hat too clean for honest work. Ethan said nothing, only pulled out his small leather pouch. The coins jingled softly. 30 and not a cent more, he replied. "I'm not here for show." The dealer sniffed. "Sold," he barked suddenly, slamming his gavel. "To the gentleman who knows a bargain when he sees one." The crowd murmured as Ethan stepped forward. He tossed a gold coin toward Hollis, who caught it mid-air, biting it like a man checking for deceit. "You can take them, cowboy," he said with a smirk. "But I hope you know what you're buying. They bite." Ethan ignored him. He climbed onto the platform and drew out his pocketknife. Slowly, he cut the ropes from the sisters' wrists. Both flinched, expecting a blow that didn't come. He kept his voice low and calm. "You're safe now," he said. "I'm not gonna hurt you." The elder sister met his eyes again. "Why?" she whispered in broken English. Ethan paused. "Because nobody deserves chains." He led them off the platform through the muttering crowd. Someone spat on the ground near his boots. Another man laughed. "Hey cowboy, you buying wives now?" Ethan didn't answer. He guided the sisters toward Dusty, his horse, keeping his body between them and the onlookers. When they reached the edge of town, he untied his canteen and handed it to the younger one. She hesitated, then drank greedily. He studied them in silence for a moment. The older one's expression was guarded but proud. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "Nayeli," she said at last, pointing to herself. Then she touched the younger girl's shoulder. "Tala. I'm Ethan," he said. "Ethan Cole." They didn't answer, only looked at each other. The sun was dipping low now, turning the sky a fiery orange. Ethan loosened the saddle straps and gestured toward the open trail. "My ranch isn't far," he said. "You can rest there. No chains. No one will touch you." Nayeli frowned slightly, not trusting him yet, but exhaustion won. The three of them walked side by side out of Santa Fe as twilight deepened and the sounds of the market faded behind them. The road stretched long and empty ahead, winding through dry arroyos and stands of mesquite. Coyotes howled somewhere in the distance. Ethan felt their fear, their silence heavy beside him. He wondered how long they'd been captives, what they'd seen, what they'd lost. He glanced back once at the town's flickering lights, then forward toward the open desert. He didn't know why he'd done it, maybe pity, maybe conscience, but something told him the decision would change everything. The West had its own kind of justice, and by morning he might have to defend what he'd just done. Still, as the stars came out above the horizon, he felt strangely calm. The sisters walked beside him quietly, their faces lit by starlight, and for the first time in months Ethan felt a sense of purpose, like he'd finally done something that mattered. The trail north of Santa Fe wound through red dust and wild cactus country. The sky had turned deep violet, the kind of twilight that set the desert aflame before surrendering to darkness. Ethan rode slowly, his horse Dusty carrying his saddlebag and an extra blanket. The two sisters walked beside him, silent and cautious, keeping a careful distance. He had offered to let them ride, but they had refused with small shakes of their heads. After years of being treated like cargo, perhaps they no longer trusted a man's kindness. Ethan didn't push. He simply guided the way, letting the night air cool his thoughts. By the time they reached his ranch, a modest spread tucked between two rocky hills, the stars had scattered thick across the sky. The main house was small, built from adobe and pine, with a tin roof that glimmered faintly under moonlight. Beyond it stretched the corral, a few cattle pens, and a windmill creaking in the distance. Ethan dismounted and held out a hand. "You can rest here tonight," he said gently. "There's food inside. Water too." Nayeli, the older sister, studied him. Even in the dim light, her eyes were sharp, watchful, protective of her younger sister, Tala. "Why you help?" she asked, her voice halting, heavy with accent but filled with suspicion. Ethan hesitated before answering. "Because you deserved better than what I saw today. No one should live like that." She seemed unconvinced, but exhaustion softened her expression. She nodded slightly. "We stay, only tonight," she murmured. Ethan smiled faintly. "Stay as long as you need." Inside the small ranch house, the air smelled faintly of smoke and coffee. Ethan lit a lantern, filling the room with a golden glow. He handed them plates of beans, cornbread, and dried beef, simple food, but warm and real. The sisters ate slowly at first, their eyes darting around as if expecting someone to burst in and take it away. Ethan sat at the far end of the table, giving them space. He spoke quietly, explaining that he lived alone and kept mostly to himself. He mentioned his small herd, his work, and the loneliness of a man who spent too long listening only to the wind. Tala, the younger one, eventually broke her silence. "You, no wife?" she asked timidly, pointing to his hand. Ethan chuckled softly. "No wife. No family either. Just me and the land." Tala smiled shyly for the first time, a quick flicker of warmth before her guard went up again. Nayeli watched him carefully, her gaze unreadable. After the meal, Ethan brought out 2 spare blankets and pointed toward the small spare room. "You can sleep there. The door locks from the inside." He saw the relief flicker across Nayeli's face at that. Trust was not yet there, but safety, at least for tonight, was. Morning broke early in the desert. The air was crisp, the sky wide and endless. Ethan was already outside, boiling coffee over the fire pit when he saw the sisters standing near the corral. They were watching the horses, Tala smiling, Nayeli quiet and thoughtful. He approached slowly. "You like horses?" Nayeli nodded. "Apache love horse. Horse is, spirit friend. She placed a hand on the corral rail, eyes softening. Ethan smiled. You can ride if you want. Dusty's gentle. She hesitated, glancing at Tala, then shook her head. Not now. But that morning marked a shift, small but real. They began helping around the ranch, first cautiously, then with growing comfort. Nayeli carried water and fed the chickens. Tala swept the porch and gathered wild herbs from the nearby hill. Their presence changed the place. Laughter returned, songs hummed under breath, and for the first time in years, Ethan didn't eat alone. Still, danger lurked closer than he realized. By the end of that week, word of what had happened at the Santa Fe market began to spread. Rumors carried fast in the territories, faster than a bullet. By the third day, a group of ranchers from town rode out to Ethan's place. He saw them coming from the ridge, 5 riders, dust clouds trailing behind. He tightened his jaw, knowing exactly what they wanted. He told the sisters to stay inside and bolted the door behind them. When the riders stopped near his gate, the lead man, a big red-faced rancher named Carl Benson, spat tobacco into the dirt. "Mornin', Cole," he said, voice heavy with mock courtesy. "Heard you made a little purchase in town last week." Ethan leaned on his fence, arms crossed. "I paid fair and square." Benson smirked. "That ain't the point. You know the law. Captives like that belong to whoever holds the deed. You can't just ride off with 2 Indians and call it charity." Ethan's voice stayed calm, but his eyes hardened. "They're not property. Not anymore." One of the men laughed. "You getting soft, Cole. Since when did cowboys play savior to savages?" Ethan's hand slid to the rifle resting by the post. "Since the day I saw 2 people treated worse than animals," he said evenly. "You boys rode a long way. Best keep riding." The air grew thick. The men shifted in their saddles, reading the quiet promise in his voice. After a tense moment, Benson sneered and turned his horse. "You'll regret it, Cole," he spat. "Ain't no place in this country for a man who sides with them." They rode off, their threats lingering like dust in the wind. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire, cleaning his revolver, the shadows of the flames flickering across his face. He knew trouble would come. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. He looked toward the small room where Nayeli and Tala slept. He hadn't asked what horrors they'd faced before Santa Fe, he didn't need to. He saw it in their silence, in the way Nayeli always positioned herself between him and her sister. Around midnight, Nayeli appeared quietly by the doorway. She stood for a long moment before speaking. "Those men come again." "Probably," Ethan said softly. "But they won't take you. Not while I'm here." Her dark eyes held his, the firelight reflecting in them. "You risk for us," she said. "Why?" Ethan hesitated. "Because it's the right thing to do." She tilted her head. "Right thing, always cost much." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, usually does." They sat in silence for a while, the crackle of the fire the only sound between them. For the first time, Nayeli's shoulders relaxed, just slightly. She was beginning to see that this man, this lonely cowboy, meant what he said. By dawn, the sisters joined him outside, helping with chores like it was the most natural thing in the world. The sun rose golden over the hills, glinting off the dew on the corral fence. Tala laughed as she tried to chase a stray chicken, and even Nayeli smiled, just a flicker, but enough to make Ethan's chest tighten unexpectedly. For a man who had known only solitude, the sound of laughter on his ranch was like rain after drought. He didn't realize yet how deeply his life had already changed. He only knew that the sisters, 2 strangers he had bought out of pity, had somehow brought warmth back into his world. But as he looked out across the open desert, he knew the peace wouldn't last. In the lawless West, kindness often came with a price, and Ethan Cole had just written his name on a target bigger than he'd ever faced. The days on the ranch began to slip into rhythm, quiet, steady, and strangely peaceful. The desert, which had once felt vast and empty, now seemed alive with small sounds. The soft hum of Tala's singing as she hung wet clothes on the line, the rhythmic creak of the windmill, the low murmur of Nayeli and Ethan talking over the horses in the morning light. For the first time in years, Ethan Cole's ranch didn't feel silent. It felt like home. He had always been a man of few words, shaped by hard work and harder losses. But around the sisters, something in him softened. Nayeli was cautious, deliberate, her eyes always watching, measuring trust one day at a time. Tala, on the other hand, was laughter itself, young, hopeful, and full of questions about everything. Why sky so big here? She'd ask one morning, looking up as she carried a bucket of water. Ethan grinned. Because the world hasn't learned to close in on itself yet. She giggled, not fully understanding, and ran back toward the house. But it was Nayeli who occupied his thoughts most. She had an air of quiet strength that he couldn't ignore. When she worked beside him fixing the corral fence or saddling horses, Ethan caught himself watching the graceful precision of her movements. She wasn't fragile, despite what she'd endured. She was fierce. One evening, just after sunset, they all sat outside near the fire pit. The desert cooled quickly at night, and the orange flames painted their faces with warmth. Nayeli began humming softly, an Apache song that seemed older than the hills themselves. Tala joined in, clapping softly to the rhythm. Ethan listened quietly, his heart tightening at the haunting melody. "What's it mean?" he asked. Nayeli looked at him, her expression calm but her eyes deep with memory. "It's a song for freedom," she said slowly. "For the ones who walk far and find new life." He nodded. "It's beautiful." She tilted her head, half smiling. "You don't understand all the words." "Maybe not," he said. "But I understand the feeling." For the first time, she laughed, low, genuine, like a spark breaking through the cold. Ethan smiled back, realizing how rare and precious that sound was. The next morning, danger returned to remind them that peace in the West never lasted long. Ethan rode into town for supplies. The streets were quiet, but he noticed the stares, men whispering near the saloon, the barkeep avoiding his eyes. Word had traveled further than he thought. At the general store, old Mr. Thatcher leaned on the counter as Ethan paid for flour and feed. "You've made some enemies, Cole," he muttered. "Benson's been running his mouth all week. Says you're harboring fugitives." Ethan's jaw tightened. "They're free women, not fugitives." Thatcher sighed. "Doesn't matter much what's true, son. Out here, truth don't count for much. The men with guns make the rules." Ethan loaded the supplies onto his wagon and rode back faster than usual, the weight of worry pressing on him. When he reached the ranch, the sisters were waiting near the corral, relief written across their faces. Nayeli stepped forward first. "Trouble?" she asked quietly. "Maybe," Ethan admitted. "But we'll be ready if it comes." That evening, he began teaching them how to shoot. He started with Tala, showing her how to hold the revolver, how to breathe, how to steady her aim. Her hands trembled, but she hit the tin can on her third shot, jumping with joy. "I did it," she laughed. Ethan smiled, pride flickering in his chest. "Good. Now again." Nayeli watched silently before stepping forward. "Show me." Ethan handed her the rifle, his hand brushing hers for a brief moment. Her eyes met his, calm but intense. He guided her stance, hands firm, feet balanced, shoulder squared. "Breathe slow," he said softly. "Don't fight the gun. Let it speak." She exhaled, squeezed the trigger, and the can flew off the fence in a clean shot. Tala cheered. Ethan chuckled. "Guess you don't need lessons after all." Nayeli lowered the rifle, eyes narrowing playfully. "Maybe I teach you next time." Their laughter lingered in the air long after the echoes of the gunfire faded. Days passed. The bond between them grew naturally, rooted in work, in shared meals, in the simple peace of surviving together. Ethan found himself waiting for moments just to talk with Nayeli. Sometimes she spoke about her tribe, the White Mountain Apache, their lands, their songs, their ways. Other times she asked about him, about the wars, the ranch, the loneliness. "You have good heart," she said once, watching him saddle Dusty. "But your eyes, they carry ghosts." He looked away, surprised by her insight. "Maybe we all do," he said quietly. She didn't press. She only nodded, as though she understood more than he could say. At night, when the wind swept over the desert, Ethan often found himself staring into the fire, thinking of her words. Ghosts. Yes, he carried many. But with her there, they didn't seem so heavy anymore. The turning point came one late afternoon when a summer storm rolled in unexpectedly. Thunder cracked across the sky, and a bolt of lightning struck the old barn. Within moments, flames climbed the wooden walls, roaring in the wind. Ethan sprinted toward it, shouting for the sisters to stay back, but Nayeli didn't listen. She grabbed a bucket and ran after him. The heat was unbearable. Smoke filled the air as they fought side by side, passing buckets, driving terrified horses from the stalls. Tala joined them too, coughing but determined. When the last of the fire was doused, the barn stood blackened but mostly intact. The three of them collapsed in the dirt, panting, faces streaked with soot. Ethan looked at Nayeli, admiration burning in his chest. "You could have been killed," he said, voice hoarse. She looked back, her expression fierce. "So could you." They laughed weakly, relief washing over them. And in that laughter, amidst ashes and rain, something unspoken passed between them. A spark, a truth neither dared name. That night, the air still smelled faintly of smoke, but the stars shone bright. Nayeli sat outside the house, gazing at the horizon. Ethan walked over quietly, 2 mugs of coffee in his hands. He offered one. "Thank you," she murmured, taking it carefully. They sat in silence for a while, the desert stretching wide and endless before them. "You saved my life," Ethan said finally. She shook her head. "We saved each other." He smiled at that, unable to look away from her. The firelight played across her face, highlighting the strength in her features, the same strength that had carried her through captivity, loss, and fear. "You're not afraid anymore," he said softly. "I still afraid," she whispered. "But I fight my fear now." Their eyes met, and the distance between them seemed to disappear. Ethan wanted to reach out, to touch her hand, but he didn't. Not yet. The moment was fragile, sacred. Instead, he said quietly, "You belong here, you know. Both of you. You're part of this place now." Nayeli looked at him, her eyes shimmering with a light that was both gratitude and something deeper. "Maybe, we all belong where hearts are free." Her words settled deep into his soul. And as the night stretched on, Ethan Cole realized that what began as an act of mercy had become something far greater. He hadn't just saved 2 lives, he'd found the missing piece of his own. The following weeks were filled with quiet rebuilding. The barn had been damaged but not destroyed. Ethan, with Nayeli and Tala's help, worked day after day to mend the broken beams and charred boards. The smell of smoke slowly gave way to the scent of cedar and new timber. The sisters laughed more now. Tala sang while they worked, her voice echoing across the open land. Nayeli smiled more too, though still cautious, still holding that unspoken weight of memory that shadowed her eyes. But something inside her had changed. She walked the ranch like she belonged to it. And Ethan, for the first time in years, felt like he belonged somewhere too. Yet peace in the frontier never lasted. One cool morning, as the sun rose red across the desert, a cloud of dust appeared far off the trail. Ethan narrowed his eyes. 4 riders approached fast. He knew their kind instantly, Benson and his men. Tala, who was feeding the hens, looked up. "Riders," she called out, worry in her voice. Ethan's expression hardened. "Get inside, both of you. Lock the door." Nayeli's jaw tightened. "Who? Trouble. By the time the riders reached the ranch gate, Ethan was waiting on the porch, shotgun in hand. Benson, a thick-bearded man with cruel eyes, grinned as he reined in his horse. Well, Benson drawled. "The brave cowboy himself. Heard you been hidin', my property." "They're not your property," Ethan said coldly. "They're free." Benson laughed. "Ain't nothin' free in this world, Cole. You know that. You bought 'em, but you can't keep 'em. Not after word spread. The law's on my side." Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger. "Law," he spat. "You and your kind are what's wrong with this country. You think you can buy people and call it business." Benson sneered. "I don't think, I know. Now step aside, or I'll take what's mine the hard way." From inside the house, Nayeli's voice rang out. "We are not yours." Benson's eyes flicked toward the door. "There she is," he said with a smirk. "The tall one's worth more than gold. You got good taste, Cole, but she's wasted on you." Ethan didn't reply. He raised his shotgun slowly. "You ride off now, Benson. This is your last warning." The outlaw's smirk faded. "So be it. The first shot cracked the still air. Ethan ducked behind the porch post as bullets splintered the railing. He fired back, hitting one of Benson's men clean in the shoulder. The man fell, screaming, into the dust. Nayeli pushed Tala toward the back of the house. "Stay down," she ordered. She grabbed Ethan's spare rifle and rushed outside before he could stop her. "Nayeli." She took position beside him, calm and steady despite the danger. Her first shot hit another rider's horse, sending the man tumbling. The second grazed Benson's hat clean off. "You shoot better than most men I know," Ethan shouted over the gunfire. "Maybe better than you," she said, a flash of defiance in her eyes. He almost smiled, even as he reloaded. The shootout raged for minutes that felt like hours. Finally, only Benson remained, his men down, his horse limping. He spat into the dirt. "This ain't over," he growled. "You'll regret this." Ethan stepped forward, gun leveled. "You ever come near them again, I'll finish it." Benson glared, then turned his horse and rode off into the desert, his shadow disappearing in the rising heat. Dash dash dash. The silence that followed felt deafening. Ethan lowered his gun slowly. Nayeli stood beside him, breathing hard but unshaken. Her braid was loose, soot on her cheek, eyes bright with fierce pride. Tala ran out from the back, crying out in relief. "They gone. They're gone," Ethan said quietly. The three of them stood together, the wind sweeping across the open range. For the first time, the land felt safe again. Dash dash dash. That evening, after burying the bodies of the men who had fallen, Ethan sat on the porch. Steps, exhaustion written all over him. Nayeli joined him, her face lit softly by the lantern's glow. "You saved us," she said. He shook his head. "No, we saved each other." Again, she smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what freedom means, not just being alive, but fighting for each other." He looked at her for a long time, then said quietly, "You don't have to stay here if you don't want to. You and Tala could go anywhere now. You're free women." She was silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Then she said softly, "Freedom without belonging is just another kind of empty." He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, meeting his eyes, "our home burned once. Our people scattered. But here," she gestured around, "the barn, the fields, the endless sky. Here, we found something new. You gave us safety, respect, kindness. And maybe more." Ethan's chest tightened. "Nayeli." But before he could finish, she reached out and placed her hand over his. Her touch was gentle, steady. "You gave us life again," she whispered. "Now let me give you yours." Dash dash dash. The days turned into weeks, and slowly the ranch became more than a refuge, it became a family. Ethan repaired the old barn, and Tala planted wildflowers near the corral. Nayeli helped him break a new horse, her laughter echoing across the valley. The pain of the past lingered, but it no longer ruled them. One cool autumn morning, Ethan rode into town for supplies. When he returned, he found the sisters waiting by the porch, both dressed in clean dresses Tala had sewn herself. Nayeli's hair was loose, caught by the breeze. She smiled softly. "We have something for you." Tala handed him a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside was a necklace, woven with leather and turquoise beads, an Apache design. "For protection," Nayeli said. "So your spirit never walks alone." Ethan swallowed hard. "Thank you. It's beautiful." Tala grinned. "Nayeli made it. She put her heart in it." Nayeli glared playfully, blushing. "Tala." Ethan looked between them, then said quietly, "Your sister's right, you know. You did put your heart in it. And I think I left mine somewhere near yours." For a moment, silence. Then Nayeli stepped closer, her hand finding his. The desert wind blew around them, carrying the scent of sage and dust. In that still, perfect moment, words were no longer needed. Dash dash dash. Months later, when winter rolled across the Arizona plains, the ranch was alive with warmth and laughter. Ethan had built a small new cabin nearby, one for Tala, who had begun courting a young ranch hand from town. And in the main house, Nayeli moved with quiet grace, her presence turning every room into something alive. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she stood beside Ethan on the porch, watching the orange sky melt into purple dusk. "Do you ever think about the past?" she asked softly. "Sometimes," he said, "but I think more about the future now. And what does it look like?" He turned to her, smiling. "Like this." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Then we're home." And there, in the fading light, surrounded by the vast, eternal silence of the West, the cowboy and the Apache woman found what neither of them had ever known before: peace. Not the peace of stillness, but the peace of belonging. The land, the sky, the love they'd built, it was all one and the same. A life earned, a freedom shared, and a promise that would never fade with time.